I'm trying to stick it out 11 more years, and then I'm gonna retire. I'm hoping. I wanted 67 is my goal.
Well, good luck. I'm
Yeah.
78 and still working.
You know, my father said the same thing to me because he's 76 and he went back to work after
Yeah.
he retired.
Yeah, 76 is the new 60.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my dad started working for Lowe's in
Say that
large
up.
appliances.
Say that.
Oh,
sounds
really?
He's always been a
really good.
salesperson.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And the boss keeps trying to convince him to up his hours from
Neil said
20
I
to
knew
40.
that.
He's like, Jim, you sell more appliances in your 20 hours than my two other guys working 40. Dad's like, I know how to talk to people. But no, I don't want more hours.
Well, I tell you what, I used to go to Lowe's all the time for stuff like that, appliances and all, when they had their full-time men who knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of all their full-time people and hired all these part-time yahoos
See,
that
and-
don't know anything, and you go in and
Dad
ask them,
knows his appliances.
will this microwave oven fit in the hole above my stove? You can go online at such,
Actually, Dad will tell grown men, do you have permission from your wife?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, September 11th, 2024 Planning Board meeting. If you all would join me in the pledge, and please remain standing after. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to take a moment of reflection to honor all the people who lost their lives in September 11th. Please take a moment and reflect. Thank you. God bless their sacrifice.
all right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Get some shade on these old eyes. Okay, the meeting will come to order. This is a public hearing. I've once again been given the script on what the planning board is and who it does. For some reason, I don't like that. So, because evidently we need to convince or sell or instruct or inform the general citizenry that we're watching this program what the planning board does. So I'll read right out of the code. So under section 3.9.1 general, the planning board is hereby established to advise city council concerning matters which pertain to the preservation and enhancement of the residential and business community and the natural environment of the city of Oldsmar. Recommendations of the planning board to the city council are made after evaluating the technical review committee's recommendations and testimony at public hearings. Now, I could go on, and next month I'll read establishment procedures, qualifications, vacancies, and the like. And I recommend to all those watching that if you don't know what the planning board does, please visit my Oldsmar and look up this code, which you should know how to do anyway if you're interested in city procedures, and that will inform you on a personal level rather than me reading a pre-prepared script for myself. So, that being said, we will move on to the open forum. Anyone wish to speak to this committee? Seeing no one in the audience but our Miss Tatiana, I will close the open forum. Swearing in process. Anyone wishing to speak to this public hearing and needs to be sworn in, please stand and do so.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda is approve the minutes dated August 14th.
I make a motion to accept the minutes of August 14th as presented.
Did you write the case number down?
It's a minute.
I like this, though. I seek a second.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Item 2, CA 2406, City of Oldsmar Code Amendment to revise Section 2.1, definitions defining accessory structures. Tatiana, I believe you have the floor.
Thank you. Tatiana Childress, City of Oldsmar Planning and Redevelopment Director. And this is CA 2406, text amendment to accessory structure standards. A little bit of a background. So the purpose of this text amendment is to update the accessory structure definitions and ensure consistent and clear code application, and address also some community concerns. Accessory structures such as sheds and garages are common in residential areas and are subject to various regulations, including zoning and flood regulations, as well as building standards. The current definitions of accessory structures lack the reference to the flood regulations and the Florida Building Code requirements. Additionally, LDC Land Development Code Section 5.1.9.1 requires that all accessory structures on all residentially zoned properties be set back 5 feet from all other structures. And we've looked this up, and for this particular provision, it allows for better exterior maintenance of the structures, and it also provides for like better air circulation around structures. So there's no particular building code that requires you to set those structures a certain distance from your residentially zoned in residentially zoned districts. The text amendment again is the request to amend the Land Development Code of the City of Oldsmar, amending Section 5.1.9, location of accessory structures and uses in residential districts. Article 2, definitions, Section 2.1, general, amending definitions for accessory structure, and Section 3.3.2, building permits, subsection 3.3.2.2, procedure requiring building plans designed in accordance with the current Florida Building Code for accessory structures over 100 square feet. So, in other words, we have 3 main items on the agenda. So if you open your text amendment, you'll see that the first one is kind of like a housekeeping item. We had this in the code for a while since we amended the flood, where the structures over 100 square feet, they required Florida Building Code compliance. So if you order a shed or a garage from somewhere out of state, say Carolina Sheds, and it's over 100 square feet, it needs to have a stamp from the engineer who is licensed to do work in Florida. And it applies for all of the other structures. So that's over 100 square feet. So if your shed is 100.1, it has to have that stamp, and Pinellas County building official will have to examine those plans and issue the permit, the true building permit. If it's under 100 square feet, it's still subject to local zoning codes and flood regulations, which means that you still have to start with our planning department, zoning, permitting, bring us a sketch, demonstrate where that shed will be placed, and then we'll review it for zoning, setbacks, lot coverage, other zoning regulations, and also for flood anchoring if it's in the flood zone. The second one is also kind of like a housekeeping. So in our definitions for the accessory structures, we had a generic language saying that it must meet this and that, but we didn't really have a clear reference to the flood regulations and building code regulations, so we're just putting that language there for the clarity of code application. And the third one is the request from R6, which is our Galera Village, the mobile home community park. That's the requirement to reduce the 5-foot setback from the building to the 1-foot maximum, because by their bylaws, HOA regulations, they actually had this for a while where it's like just a maximum of 1 foot, but somehow in our land development code, it says, the code clearly says that it's in all residential districts. And the mobile home park is a residentially zoned district, so it kind of like applies there, but we're trying to make it easier for them to get the permits, understanding that they have smaller lot sizes, and that's really a unique zoning district outside of, our regular R1, which is residential 1, R2, residential 2, estate. Those are larger lots like estate 1, estate 2, they're acre and half an acre lots. With that being said, I have also the Land Development Code here, section 3.13.2, and I will read into the record because we have to run each text amendment by the section of the code, the 3.13.2, making sure that it's consistent with the Land Development Code 3.13.2. And the first requirement is the amendment complies with the comprehensive plan and advances the purpose of the Land Development Code. So our comprehensive plan requires that growth and development be managed through land development regulations, ensuring consistency with FEMA standards, the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP regulations, and all relevant state, regional, and county standards. And since most properties in Oldsmar are in flood zones, they must comply with FEMA construction requirements, including those for accessory structures. So section 6.16.6 of the LDC specifically outlines standards for accessory structures in flood zones. The amended definition will now reference these flood regulations to guide applicants and staff reviewers. It also clarifies that accessory structures over 100 square feet require building plans compliant with the Florida Building Code, as I just mentioned. And this is just a general graphic which shows all of those kind of like items that I just described on a nice picture here. So you see that there's a BFE, which stands for the base flood elevation. That's your kind of like water line. If you're living in a flood zone, so you may experience flooding, and in this instance, you can see the flood openings. So the water's supposed to freely go through those openings into your shed, and instead of pushing on those walls, creating maybe a collapse situation, it will equalize the pressure and preserve your structure maybe. Also, the materials below that BFE, below that water line, are excuse me, recommended to be made out of the flood-resistant materials. And then, as I mentioned, the structure will need to be anchored, and city staff will go after you install your structure to check to see if that structure is properly anchored. As I already mentioned, so the second amendment is the R6 standards. R6 is our Galera Village subdivision, which is a mobile home park subdivision. They have smaller lots, and they have also reduced setbacks. So applying that 5-foot setback, as in any other residential districts, is really difficult. So we're proposing this amendment for their accessory structures to be placed no more than 1 foot from the mobile homes. The second condition, the amendment will contribute to promote the community welfare. While the amendment will promote community welfare by ensuring uniform code applicability through standards like Florida Building Code for structures over 100 square feet and FEMA regulations for accessory structures in a special flood hazard area. Providing for protection against flooding damage and storm-related hazard for both property owners and neighboring properties. For the mobile home park subdivision, the R6 district will exempt them from the 5-foot standard, and the community will, we recognize the unique standards of that community, basically. The amendment will not grant a special privilege to an individual property owner. The proposed text amendment to revise the accessory structure definitions and standards will apply citywide, and the revised setback standard in the R6 district will apply to the entire zoning district. As such, no individual property owner will be granted a special privilege. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Tatiana. Seeing as this is a public hearing, does anyone, I can't, there's no one here. So, I'll open a public hearing. Seeing that there's no one to speak, anyone opposed? Seeing none. Anyone in favor? Seeing none. Any written opposition or hearing none? Does anyone have any questions of the applicant, the presenter, which would be Tatiana of the Weak Voice? Stephen?
Yes, actually. My question is, why is this only applying to the R6 district? There are several other places where there are very small lots as well in Oldsmar. my neighborhood, as a matter of fact. Most of the lots there are quite tiny. The backyards are little more than a porch, 5 feet and the fence, and that's it. So I'm wondering why this modification is only going to apply for R6, and it says it's going to be citywide, but it's not citywide, it's only R6.
It's citywide for all of the other residential districts, and we're taking into consideration that in any other districts, we're also allowing for the structures to be more than 100 square feet. So in Gull Air, the structure is limited to 100 square feet, so they're really unique. They have their own bylaws, so they have HOA standards where they wanted to have it at 1 foot. So it was a request directly from the Gull Air Village board of their board to basically make this consistent. It was not reviewed for the entire city of Oldsmar because they've been using this in the city of Oldsmar for years.
Right.
So now all of a sudden changing this, we didn't want to create a major change for the city and all the other residential districts. If there is a request for that, we can definitely put it on the agenda item and review it again in other districts. But again, as we mentioned, for maintenance, for your airflow, so you want to have that separation between your structures, between your main house here, especially in Florida, and your structures, so that the moisture doesn't kind of like get trapped in there. And for maintenance, even like leaves, like if you rake. So I think the 5 foot was placed in there with the intent that this is really kind of like an ideal situation for maintenance. Plus, it's also 5 foot from your side setback, so it's sort of kind of like for consistency on both. But we haven't really, and we understand that Gull Air here is the subdivision with the smaller lots out of all of the residential districts. This is the reason why for now. I mean, definitely if you wanted the city to evaluate this citywide in all of the residential district, not just
Well,
the
it would
R6.
seem like that would be the fair thing to do. I mean, if the standard is that the lots are small, then that should be the standard, not that it's zoned R6. If the lot is under a certain size, then the structure
I
could.
see. Typically,
could
it's per
override
zoning
this.
district, so typically those standards, when we're talking about the measurement of some sort, that would be per zoning district. It's not kind of like an administrative item, so that the structures are uniformly placed as well. We haven't applied this to the entire city. There was a discussion, but then we started thinking about, okay, so they may have a wider setback, and then it may create a situation where there might be debris trapping in between that house, and it may create a situation where there might be other items in there that may be blocking something. So we decided to keep it at 5 for now, so.
Okay.
Jessica?
Well, I guess my question would be if a resident has a structure that isn't in compliance with these regulations, will they be asked to make those modifications to bring it up to compliance?
So those would be under the category of existing nonconformities. We just do not have resources to go into every
Okay.
home, knock on the door and
Yeah.
say, is your shed placed 5 foot away? So
Okay.
there's been maybe a situation where they were placed without a permit, or people were not aware of this placement, or some instances the lot lines are not exactly where your fence was, and it was measured from the fence. So there's been a lot of things in the past that we've seen. So no, the
Okay.
answer will be, it will be applied to the new permits
To
or the
new
ones
permit.
that are.
Okay, well, that answers my question. Thank you, Tatiana.
Sure.
Mr. Bob?
Well, I can tell you that the next meeting moved mine. Some years ago, I called the code enforcement to complain about the house behind me, and I believe it's 513 Maplewood. They have 4 rusty sheds in their backyard. And the only reason I don't push the envelope, so to speak, is it gives me privacy. They can't see me and I can't see them. But it is very, very ugly. And if the time comes, or when the time comes to sell my house, that's really gonna cost me. I really do feel like, because they're ugly, and they're really ugly.
Yeah.
And so I asked the code enforcement, and he said, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with those sheds." Okay, but yet, when we're walking back to the front, I have one of those plastic things. It's made to go up against a house. I don't know if you've seen them or not, but what it is, it looks like a half of a house, because it's got a roof, half a roof on it. And that's what I've got in mind, and that's where you keep the lawnmowers and things like that. And, but when we were walking back, he said, "But now this is out of code." Gotcha. I said, "It is?" I didn't know, but he said, "This is out." I said, "Well, okay, you're gonna make me move it?" And he said, "No, we're not gonna make you move it." Well, okay, so that answers your question.
That answers my question too.
My concern, I understand your explanation.
Yeah.
And Steve he's absolutely right about the lots. I mean, I'm in Harbor Palms. I have one of the wide lots in Harbor Palms. It's 75 feet. That's a wide one. So I have 12 feet on either side of my house. So if I comply with this, I come in 5 feet from the house and 5 feet from the line, I got a 2-foot wide building I can put on the side, in my side yard. Now, I know that's ridiculous, and I know that's not gonna happen, but, when you start, my concern has always been, when you put things in writing, that means it's in black and white, and that's the way it is, and we can enforce it the way it is, without any variation or anything. And I understand what you're saying, and I believe every word you're saying. I've had, my situation with you and Dan and all that, my fence and all. You guys worked with me, and I'm very much appreciative of the fact that you did. But the fact of the matter is, it's in black and white, and when you leave, and when Dan leaves, and when everybody else leaves, it's in black and white. So the people in front of us, ahead or behind us, they may get stuck with this. And that's always bothered me, that you put it in black and white, but you don't put any parameters of again, I know I'm,
Slow down.
I always not lose my train of thought, but I lose my words. But there needs to be some way to say there are exceptions, and and here's some examples of these exceptions. So I'm all in favor of it, but I would like to see some
So in this
something.
instance, there's no exceptions and there are no changes to that 5 foot from any other district, with the exception of the R6 district. So that's the only one that's changing to 1, and that's
Right,
our Galair. We're not changing anything else. It's that same code that's been here for years with Marie, and
Right.
we're not changing that. And this is just to sort of kind of like keep how it used to be. And even with the Galair, so it's more for code clarity, because we have new staff coming in and they're reviewing the code and they're pointing out to my attention and to other senior staff, saying, well, it says here clearly that's an old residential district. So, and there was a discrepancy where in the R6 they've been applying the 1 foot. So if it's not in the code, then technically it should be 5. So,
Right.
and for years it hasn't been applied like this, as though they didn't treat the R6 as a residential district. So therefore, this is a code clarity moving forward, so that staff after us will be able to look up the code and clearly see what's a requirement for that particular zoning district is at that time. So we're actually clearing it here. We're not making it more unclear with the exceptions or anything. So this is just for code clarity. Just wanted to point that out.
Another question?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just to clarify, basically, this is because of the HOA Board of Directors for Gull Air. And whatever's already people have there, they're not going to be fined for it. Nothing's going to have to change unless they sell and move, and then the new residents will
It is my understanding that it's been applied for many years before that, where they had the 1 foot maximum
Right.
in Gulf Air based on their HOA rules. So we're just making that provision in our land development code. So it allows them to, allows city staff to review each application consistent with the land development code and consistent with their bylaws, HOA bylaws. Their bylaws could be more restrictive than the city code, but they could never be less, kind of like they could allow more restrictive code applications, yes.
Thank you for that.
Joseph obviously didn't make it. Lynette, you have any questions?
I just want to clarify that I'm hearing everything correctly. So Stephen pointed out that there are other residential areas that could be smaller in size, just like Gulf. So the 1 foot that's applied to Gulf may need to be applied to other areas. And if we want that reviewed, that's something that we can ask for to have it reviewed, so.
In the future, yes. With this code amendment, we only have this for the R6, which is mobile homes and subdivisions, which is our Gulf Air district. And they have a minimum of 5,000 square foot per lot. So there's some other districts where they have maybe RPD, residential plan development, where it's duplex situation. I don't believe we permit, or their HOAs permit, the sheds in those areas at all. So in our R6, the minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet, with the lot rear setback of 10 feet. So it allows for a larger backyard, side yard. And 6,000 square feet is the minimum. Most of our residential R1 and R2s are larger than 6,000 square feet. So I'm not sure if you're in R6 or R2.
I'm in
sorry, in
Bayside Meadows.
Bayside
And
Meadows.
all of the street units, the ones that are lining
Mm-hmm.
the streets, they've set all the houses further back from the streets. They've got big front yards, but the backyard is non-existent. It's literally the size of this table.
Right, but I'm not sure in Bayside if they even permit the sheds in there. So in some of the smaller subdivisions that are regulated by the
Well,
HOA.
there's no HOA there.
I
So-
see. So I'm not sure if they would be permitted in Bayside Meadows. Those are R3 zoning?
I think so, yeah.
I'll
think
double
it's
check on
R3.
the zoning, so,
I don't have
it
it
might
in front
be,
of me.
maybe, I'm not sure if the sheds are permitted in there altogether because of the lot sizes. So here we're kind of like, the Gulf area is sort of kind of like between your single family because they're all individually owned. Typically, you would have a land that's owned by a park, and then you would just bring your home on it. So you wouldn't be a homeowner with the land when you're owning a mobile home or the modular home. In
Right.
this instance, it's a difference. So they actually own the land underneath. So, but in some instances, there would be like a 0 lot design. So I'm not sure if Bayside Meadows is a 0 lot, in which instance you don't really
think so,
have,
no.
because it's like, if you think of a Gulf, so it's your typical residential single-family home with the setbacks on the side, rear, and front. So just designed as a typical single-family home with regular setbacks, zoning setbacks. They just have smaller lot sizes.
Yeah.
Whereas some other subdivisions where you may have, like Bayside Terrace, so they have units that are attached to each other. So, and there's like 6 of them attached to each other. They still own the land underneath, but there's no room there to put their sheds or anything else outside, even though they may have a lot or a backyard in the back. So it's slightly different when you're dealing with the 2-unit situation attached versus
Well,
like
these
a
are
mobile home.
single-family homes.
Single-family
So,
homes.
Yeah, they're, it's just a normal house. They're not big houses, and they're definitely not big backyards. But I do know that the houses at the ends of the cul-de-sacs have much larger lots. I have one of those, and almost all of them have a shed behind them.
I see.
But the houses along the edges of the street, there's no space for it, anything really behind the house, so.
Well, maybe we'll revisit this
Yeah.
and maybe it will be applied to,
Well, I would like to see it more broadly applied than just
Right.
saying that this counts for R6 and nobody else gets to be included in that. So that's the way I would like to see it applied. If, because you're saying R6 has small lots, so we're going to change the regs for R6, but other people have small lots
I see.
too. So, but they're still forced to comply with the regulations. So,
Lynette, do you have any more questions of staff?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, I do. Tatiana, this is a citywide, this isn't R6, this is R2, this is everybody that this applies to. It says so right here, the proposed text amendment, citywide. So here I am.
citywide, there are 2 amendments that are citywide, and then the R6 is only to the R6. The 1
Right.
foot is only the R6.
Right, that only affects a certain small community in our city. Everybody else is gonna have to follow these definitions and guidelines, correct?
Everybody has to follow all of the definitions. The only provision here is in the definitions of location of accessory structures. So if you go into 5.1.9, which is citywide application as well, it says
Wait, I'm looking for 5.159.
it's in the
Page 10.
staff report.
page 10.
Right, no closer than 5 feet. Well, yeah,
Right,
okay,
so
I
that's
get
the only
that.
exception for, you can reword it saying that, all of the provisions are citywide with the exception of the R6 zoning for only that placement of accessory structure, so they're permitted to have 1 foot. All of the other provisions, anchoring, the 100 square foot for the building code, the flood-resistant materials and everything else, so that's citywide.
The
If you're
definition-
in the,
Tatiana, according to number 3, amendment will not grant special privilege. The proposed text amendment will revise accessory definition standards and apply citywide. That means that me and my R2 can no longer put a 200 square foot accessory structure on my property. And now, unless I jump through all these hoops with FEMA architectural designs, surveys that are done with the last 12 months, copies too with seals, and architectural design, flood, how do you get flood
so again,
resistant?
this is a code clearing, kind of like a housekeeping item. It's been in place for
Not the 100 square
multiple-
foot.
100 square foot was in place for as long as Florida Building Code started regulating it. It's not our item. Ours was saying 200 square
Right.
feet, which was incorrect. So anything over 100 square feet, we've been sending to the county for consistency. So we're just now catching up with our revision. It takes time to propose these code amendments. So in our code, we didn't even have the guidance for it, so we had to rely on Pinellas County, Florida Building Code, and anything over 100 to be compliant with FEMA, we had to send for the Florida Building Code review to Pinellas County.
So you can't go bigger than 2.
You can't go bigger than 2 unless it's a garage. So if it's a garage, then you would be limited to 600 square feet.
But
So-
didn't you used to be able to put a 200 square foot shed in your backyard? and
You
all-
could still put
Without
200.
all these extra FEMA,
No, it's always been in place since the new rules for accessory structures came in place, and it's always been here. It just wasn't as clear as we're trying to make it now. So it was sort of kind of like, must comply with flood regulations. Well, what are those flood regulations? So then you go back into
Those change
the.
every year.
Right, so then you go back, so this slide was taken from the 2021 presentation when we presented it. It was in the flood ordinance all the time. So it's just, it appears in multiple sections of the code. And for the reviewers, that's why we're saying that it's gonna be easier for the reviewers to go and to check all of these items, because now it's gonna be in the definitions, now it's gonna be in, the other section of the code. So for consistency, we're placing it in multiple places so that it's obvious for everybody who's reviewing this that, okay, if it's under 100 square feet, it's only local zoning and flood. If it's over 100 square feet, then you have to take it to the county for building review.
so this strikeout here on page 12 that says, structure according to Florida Building Code of 200 square feet or less in size, not pre-manufactured, typical wall section. You can't do that anymore. Now it's only 100 square feet with typical wall section and you come down and talk to you all about.
Correct.
So I love this slide, but what really bugged me about it was be built of flood-resistant materials, and you have, let's say, the BFE here. Every shed I've seen that you can buy at Lowe's or Costco is made of press board, PSP, which is not flood resistant. I mean, that's glued wood chips. How are you gonna find walls that are flood resistant in a shed? I mean, I would go to Costco, buy a $4,000 prefab 97 square foot shed, slap it on, 13 feet above mean sea level, because that's now flood elevation, which requires a ramp to drive my lawnmower up into, but it's also not waterproof inside.
These are coming from FEMA, the federal
Yeah,
regulations.
they're nuts.
I am not the one who put them in place. I am not the one
I know I'm
who,
on record.
I was hired to regulate them, and these are the newer regulations, and not just to protect your investment. So those sheds are not cheap anymore. So if you're putting them in the flood zone, the next time it floods, so you probably want to have it out of metal or some kind of like plastic or something, or maybe like in Galera, what I've seen, they're actually elevating those sheds to the same elevation as their home. So as they're building new homes, so we just had one that was placed in there. So they had their shed incorporated in the back of the sunroom, and it's elevated, anchored, or properly, engineered as part of their sunroom addition. I understand it's a unique situation, so yes, but that's probably what we have to think if you are resilient, if you want to protect your investment. So, and these things are recommendations, but we also regulate them. So not recommendation, requirements now, if you,
I didn't think FEMA insured the contents of a storage shed. I mean, so what's the FEMA protection on a shed? For the shed itself? Or for the neighbors when your shed floats away?
both probably. So the contents will not be covered in your shed, you're correct.
Yeah.
They're not insurable. However, this is just to protect to make you aware if you live in the flood zone, so that you don't have to buy that shed every 3 years when all floods.
All right.
I have something else I'd like to say, ask.
You want to do it now to staff, or you want to do it through discussion?
Yeah, I want to do it. Well,
Go ahead.
staff problem, but to anybody.
Run.
Okay, I want to put a shed on my place, and it's 125 square feet, okay? Means they have to meet regulations. Fine. Now, I go to Lowe's or Costco or wherever, and I buy one of those plastic ones. Do those meet that regulation?
They'll float faster than a wooden one.
So they do have anchoring that comes with the details, and as long as there is a seal from the PE, Pinellas County will accept those. And if they are from flood-resistant materials, then it will meet this bulletin for FEMA as well, yes.
Well, I mean, over my lifetime, I've probably owned at least a half a dozen sheds, if not more. And I have never even thought to look to see if they met building codes.
Well, they sell an anchoring kit with the one.
I know that.
But it ain't flood-proof inside.
Right. It's not
So
foolproof.
now, a lot of shed companies, distributors out there, they will be actually, they require you to have a zoning approval in a lot of places, and they will require you to state flood zone or no flood zone, so that they know you can't just bring it and place it in place. So I'm not sure if Lowe's is up to speed on those. And they will also make you sign a waiver of some sort saying that you check your local zoning regulations in some places. I'm not saying all of them are doing that.
Well, I
So,
haven't heard of that, but okay, all right.
and
Well,
again,
that's
if
good
it's
to know.
over 125, unfortunately, you have to take it to the building code. But if you reduce it to 100 square feet, you don't have to. So all you have to
Right.
do is just purchase it from flood-resistant materials and that anchoring. You may also have to add the flood openings, though, if they don't come with flood openings. The ones that you order from the distributor, they actually offer these engineered flood vents as part of this. Yes.
There's nothing in there about how many of these sheds you can put on your property.
Yeah, there you
Correct.
go.
And that would be a next item. So we're just sort of kind of like initiating. This is the first stab at accessory structures. We understand that there might be some additional code amendments, and how many of them, that's an item of the discussion right now. So we just don't want to create what we call nonconformities, because if you go through the city, there might be properties where you have 2 or 3 sheds in the backyard, but all of a sudden we say 1 only. So that would
that
be
would
kind of
be-
like limiting, are we encroaching in the property rights? So that's a discussion item, so we may
Yeah.
have to do a little bit more research. This is more of a housekeeping item, as I said. These were kind of like, we thought, easy ones that we can put in now so that we can apply them with the easy code application, so we can just state a section of the code.
Well, what are you gonna do? So, we have no more questions for staff?
Yeah, I got one more. So I noticed in the strike through on page 12, this is, was this 3.3.2.2? The strike through that you have here has an inclusion in it that says, "and not pre-manufactured." So that was originally an exception, that a pre-manufactured shed did not have to comply with that sort of thing. And it's struck through now, so that is being removed.
So the pre-manufactured are okay if they're over 125 with that stamp.
Right.
So before they were saying, well, it's pre-manufactured and it's over a certain, so I can just go ahead and install it. So there were a lot of questions on what are those pre-manufacturing, because the pre-manufacturing, I don't believe it's defined in there. So you can go to Lowe's pre-manufacturing, those would be from Lowe's, Home Depot, the ones that are already under 100 square feet, so would not require building permit. Pre-manufacturing that you get in from the builder over 100 square feet would require that stamp from the Florida registered engineer or architect to be on that plan. So they could be also pre-manufactured.
Right. Well, my understanding was that the ones that you're getting from Lowe's are pre-manufactured.
Correct.
And you
And
bring them home
here,
and
it
assemble
was
them.
linking them to the 200, so it was creating confusion. So if it's a 200 pre-manufacturing, that means that I don't have a permit. Incorrect, because Florida Building Code requires you to obtain that permit for anything over 100
So
square
that's,
feet.
that's why it's being removed then, so that it's in compliance with Florida Building Code.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
that Costco shed's 97 square feet. They must have
You're
already
good to
figured
go,
out your,
yes.
your change here.
They're catching up with FEMA rules.
You can put 3 or 4 of them in the backyard.
Maybe they'll promote it, FEMA compliant.
Yeah, like my neighbor behind me. Or,
It's the 13 feet that scares me. All right, so we have no more questions to staff, and there is no one. I did it backwards. I had a public hearing before we did questions to staff, but it didn't matter because there's no one here. So at this point, the public hearing was opened and closed. We've all asked Tatiana all the questions we could, and right now I entertain a motion for this item.
I move, based upon the testimony, evidence, and facts presented, that the board recommend approval of case number CA 24-06.
That's great. A second, please.
Second.
Any discussion? I think we beat it up pretty good.
I think we discussed it pretty well, yep.
Yeah. All in favor, roll call vote, please.
Board Member Villafana?
Yes.
Board Member Kirby?
Yes.
Board Member Giannakos?
Yes.
Board Member Caldwell?
Yes.
Vice Chair Harvey?
Yes.
Chair Van Buren?
Yes.
6-0.
All right. I seek a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.